It's a really exciting topic, and I think that one that's gaining huge amounts of momentum. And so in this special webinar series, we're going to talk about ethical investing. For those of you not so familiar with 10,000 Girl, we're a not-for-profit social enterprise set up to improve the financial well-being of Australian women through education that is a little bit engaging and provides the time and the space and some tools for us all to have some candid, open, safe, comfortable money conversations, because in our experience that is what can propel our future plans ahead when we share our dreams and our goals and our different tips with each other. So our goal when we set out was to help 10,000 women, and we have done that. And so we've got some really exciting plans coming up in 2017. As I said, our aim is to make finance social and fun. And I think before we dive into quite a specific topic, it's important to show the bigger picture, and that there are a lot of elements that make up strong financial foundations. And we always start with talking about the importance of setting clear goals, because without the end in mind, what's the point, and how can we effectively know how many resources we need, and what's the best way to get from where we are currently to where we want to be. It's also a motivator when you keyed into your personal goals, a motivator to get that sort of more boring finance admin under control. Then, of course, it's about having strong foundations and knowing where your money is now, what's coming in, what's going out, how that's set up, and then to get into a bit more meaty stuff. So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to be talking about quite a specific way to look at investing, and we've got two fabulous women involved with us today that I'll introduce shortly, who are going to share their expertise in this area. Then, of course, there is super and tax and estate planning, and the importance of building a really strong support network. And I think that with a strong support network, anything is possible. So more and more of us, and I find definitely the generations coming through now, and more so a real hunger and appetite for this information coming from women, we want to know where and how our money is invested, and that it is doing good things, and that we feel that then our every step in our lives are aligned with our values and our personal philosophies. I'm just going to launch a poll and see how many people now are actively investing ethically, how many people are in the process of learning about ethical investing, and how many of you look at yourselves and think, oh, I don't know much, but I'm really interested in knowing more. So give us a bit of an indication about where you feel you sit, and we can make sure we focus on the areas and pitch this to the audience that is online. Votes are coming in. Thank you. And we'll share this. So we've got 20% are actively investing ethically now, 40% are learning, and another 40% are really interested in learning more. So we're certainly going to be talking about lots of different tips and extra resources that that I'm sure everyone in this group will be really interested in looking at going forward. So we're going to talk a bit about, well, what is ethical investing, and how to find out where your money is invested. And then, of course, the big question, how do the returns compare to the standard funds? And talking a bit about ethical super funds and how to screen individual shares, and how you can start and how you can find an ethical advisor. as I said to those of you who logged in early, please use the question box in the control panel to feed through any questions. It's a great opportunity to ask anything that's on your mind. Now, we're not providing financial advice, and we really encourage you to seek professional, independent advice before making major financial decisions. And this disclaimer goes for the panelists as well. But I hope that this information can equip you with some great questions to ask. And so when you do seek that advice, you can get huge amounts of value and really make sure that you're getting the answers that you're after. So thanks to our generous partners, Financial Literacy Australia and Rabobank. Rabobank we've been working with for 5 or 6 years now, and we share our focus on reaching women in regional areas. We work with the Financial Planning Association of Australia, where is a good place to find financial planners. HESTA, which is an industry super fund, the ATO, Understand Insurance, which is a great consumer website managed by the Insurance Council of Australia, and Credit Savvy, which has some interesting information on credit scores and the new sort of consumer credit laws that are evolving quite rapidly at the moment. So these partners have worked with us the last couple of years and really allow us to run these programs for free for you. So welcome and thank you to our special guests, Nicolette, who is from the RIAA, which is the industry body across Australia and New Zealand for responsible investing, and Michelle, who is the CEO, but also a ethical financial planner with Ethical Investment Services. So these two wonderful women, I'm going to throw it to you now to introduce yourselves. We might let Nicolette speak first and go through some of her slides, and then hear from you, Michelle, with some real action tips and some great resources. So thank you both very, very much for your time and expertise, and we look forward to hearing from you. Go, Nicolette.
Okay, thanks. All right. Well, thanks for having me speak with you about investing ethically. It's professionally and personally really important to me. Yes, that disclaimer is very important as well. So just as a background, I stumbled upon ethical investing when I was working as a climate change campaigner as manager at the Australian Conservation Foundation. We were campaigning on a price for carbon and a lower carbon agriculture, transport and energy sector. So compulsory super was being paid monthly by my employer into my incumbent super fund, which meant that in my job I was campaigning for a cleaner energy, but how and where my super went was sort of undoing all of that good work that I did during the day. So my super was invested in companies working hard to pull out more fossil fuels from the ground, and with those executives being rewarded for ever greater volumes of oil and gas being extracted and sold. So I was simultaneously part of the solution and part of the problem. So that's when we turned the Australian Conservation Foundation onto finding a more suitable default superannuation service provider, one that invested consistently with the goals of the ACF, which was sort of environmental protection and social justice. So I think it's quite apt, I suppose, that I get to speak about this from a professional perspective now as well. And that's probably the challenge I'm setting today for you, is to really start thinking about where your retirement savings or your investments are going. Are you invested in the best companies? Like, who's managing your money? Are they reflecting your own values and your needs? I'm reading a few questions here. Are there any issues that you would not like your money to be invested in? Have you thought about that? Are you invested in tobacco, nuclear devices, pornography, gambling, all these types of things? It turns out that many more people are starting to think about these issues and how their own investments can be used not only to avoid bad industries, but also how their retirement savings can be put to work to build the type of world that we all want to retire into. Okay, that's a ding for a slide change, please. Another one. Thank you. Oh, there we go. So here's an example. Not quite that far. The smoking guy from the X-Files, there he is. This is an example about people waking up to the fact that they want to invest close to their beliefs. So just 4 months ago, around August, in the New Zealand Herald ran a campaign which revealed that parliamentarians, even the Greens members, were invested in the types of companies that the New Zealanders are known to avoid. So things like nuclear energy, whale meat, landmines and tobacco. And you know why? Their sovereign super fund used a manager for international equities, and the shares on their behalf in companies were directly and indirectly invested in the companies that were doing harm. So the result was a major divestment across their superannuation or KiwiSaver industry to ensure that the underlying managers invest consistent with their member values. And what this shows me in particular is that not a huge proportion of people actively opt into ethical investments, but most expect that their investments are being invested and doing no harm. I think that's a really key point. So there's sort of a consciousness that's arising that people just don't want their money contributing to bad stuff. Next slide. Investing ethically is not all about avoiding investments. Increasingly, people are also thinking about how their investments can build a better world. And one of my faves is on the left there. That's the Victorian Comprehensive Cancer Centre. It's a state-of-the-art cancer research facility and hospital, and it was built predominantly by super fund money. Next slide. Each year for the last 15 years, we've run this survey, and in 2016, as in every year, we've found pretty much the similar picture. A large proportion of the investment industry considers this stuff. In fact, that figure, that TAUM, 47% of total assets under management in Australia is declared to be invested broadly consistent with responsible investment principles, or ESG integration, which I'll explain a little bit in a moment. It's an important distinction to make. Not all responsible investments are what we in the industry classify as ethical. There's also this concept of ESG. So the parts of the industry, the green bit, that classify themselves as core responsible investments, they claim around about 8% of total responsible investment assets for Australia. And the larger proportion on the left, the yellow donut with the bite out of it, covers assets managed by ESG integration, funds that consider environment, social and governance risks and opportunities of their underlying assets. And these guys are more likely to exclude investments like companies that are run poorly, and more likely to tilt towards investments that are better managed because they consider a more holistic concept of risk when they do their analysis. In fact, it's kind of now, it's our results, but the results are being published in journals and industry magazines now for several years. And it's widely understood that companies that are more attuned with their stakeholder interests and normative things and civil society movements and are essentially more responsible tend to make better decisions. Next slide. Here's a case in point. You may remember, some of you, I think it was last year, Volkswagen and its diesel emissions scandal. It deceived, knowingly, actively deceived its customers and the government, having met certain emission standards in various jurisdictions, when in fact they'd rigged the cars that they set forward for testing. And issues that were previously deemed non-financial, so internal ethics, corporate governance, environmental regulation, those things became very financial when the news broke. That white line is their share price dipping over a period of a few days. They lost 30% of their share price because of the scandal. Next slide. So all of this is on the background of something of an awakening going on by consumers. We're seeing a doubling of funds under management flowing into ethical products in the last 2 years as consumers sort of wake up to the fact that they can invest in line with their ethics and their values. And we think about it, it's probably been coming a long time in finance. most other industries that I've worked in, I haven't worked in pharmaceuticals, but I've worked in most other industries so far, they've gone some way through this transformation. And if you think, I mean, some of the retail examples go back many decades. Nike with sweatshops for sports shoes and apparel, Cadbury taking on for their dairy milk chocolate, really important discussion for women, having fair trade for that particular variety of chocolate, and right through to commercial property, leasing and selling with Green Star and Neighbours ratings for environment performance. So there are many different industries that have had this transformation, and our finance and investment sector is really, really starting to see it now. Next slide. So, and this is one of the questions I think that Zoe put to us is, does it really stack up financially? And I'm hoping, even though it's not the most elegant graph, that this goes some way to convincing you it does. And please don't let any advisor tell you that you have to accept lower returns just because you want to invest responsibly. What this shows is the green bars are the performance of the average responsible investment fund, and for those details which are outside the scope of this webinar, I encourage you to have a look at that report, which is on our website if you're that interested. How they've performed on 1, 3, 5 and 10 years against their benchmark indices. And these figures are net of fees. So you may, when you have an ethical, responsible fund, often that requires teams with expert experience to just do more stuff with your portfolio. So they're actively managing that, and it does sometimes attract slightly higher fees. So these results show the performance of these funds net of fees. I get really excited about that because it's just a no-brainer to do it. You can invest aligned with your values, and you can also do great returns. So, next slide. Where do you find these investments that match you and your interests? I can't do this without plugging Ria a little bit. We have a certification program for investments in super fund products and even financial advisors. And these guys meet certain performance and disclosure requirements that we set for them around responsible and ethical investing. We don't define what's ethical or responsible. We require our certified product providers in particular to disclose to you as the consumer or the investor 3 main things. 1, how they responsibly manage the investment. So what's their responsible investment strategy? 2, what are the underlying holdings in that product? So fully disclose all of the different funds that make up part of that portfolio. And 3, the performance of those products on a regular basis. That's the financial performance. We have lots of different kinds of products, from banking to super funds, even some exchange-traded funds now as part of the certification program. Next slide. The great thing about the program is we have just previously, very, very recently, launched this web tool, and the URL is at the top of the slide, responsiblereturns.com.au. This is a tool designed, it's powered by Ria's certified products and super fund and banking products in the back end, and it invites users to go on a bit of a journey, pop in some demographics about themselves, and then choose some of the exclusions and inclusions they would like in their funds. And then it produces a result, hopefully, which provides some products that will match the interests of the investor. So on the next slide, you can see, this is about 4 slides in on the web tool. It invites you to look at the top 2 issues that you want to avoid. Now, the other thing about the site is it also does allow you to compare and click through and get better details about the different products, and also to click through to the issuers of those products so that you can visit their websites or send them an email directly from our web tool. Next slide. I think it might be our second last slide. Really importantly, the tool, even though it might give you a few options, there's nothing like finding a particularly certified financial advisor to really look at your personal and your professional goals and your situation. So just investing in something because you don't like tobacco and you really do like clean energy is probably not a prudent investment way to invest. So the web tool also channels you towards RIA's website, where we currently list our certified financial advisors. So final slide, the top tips, 6 of these that my CEO put together for the 1000 girls. 1, think about what issues are important to you. 2, read. Have a read about your own super fund and see if they consider ethics and responsible investing. Most do have sections of this on their website in particular. 3, talk. If you don't find what you need, then send your super fund or your investment organisation an email. Are you considering pornography in the way you invest in my savings? And then 4, research. If you don't get an adequate response, look at our options. There's plenty of ethical investments out there, and even more responsible investing where companies are looking at the environment, social integration aspects of their investments. And our web tool helps navigate you towards them. And 5, as I said, if you need advice, and almost everybody can do with some, check if your advisor knows what they're talking about, and if they don't, we have plenty of advisors from which to choose on our certification pages as well. And then importantly, you just need to be an active citizen in this one and walk. It might just be time, if your own provider can't meet your needs, to switch to an ethical and responsible option. But when you do that, please do make sure that you let your old organisation know why you're leaving, because then that kind of feedback helps them hopefully consider developing and building a new product that they might offer consumers in the future. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicolette. That's fantastic. And I remember we made a video with the RIAA a few years ago, and the girl that we were interviewing had this great saying, "Vote with your money," and she said it is a real sign when you move your money, from somewhere or to somewhere, that you're really making a stand. But yeah, that important element of letting them know why you're moving the money, because that's only going to influence the movement more. Another great resource that you didn't mention that I use and I direct people to often on your website is the benchmark reports. I find them really interesting and really easy to use, and it's a great list of the leading super funds and managed funds that are both responsible and giving good financial returns. I find that a really good sort of first point of call. So that's another great resource. But definitely play around on the RIAA site and on their new tool, because that's terrific. Does anyone have any questions from Nicolette? Otherwise, we'll hear from Michelle, and then feel free to be feeding your questions through as we go. I know that there is a lot of questions in this space. We get a lot of questions at the different workshops, so this is a great chance to make the most of it. So Michelle, tell us a bit about you and why you're so passionate about investing ethically.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be here today because I'm really passionate about helping women sort out their finances as well. And I think it's sometimes the language of money and finance, it isn't something that comes naturally in discussions with women for a range of historical reasons, I think. And I think the more that we can encourage women to discuss finances in all sorts of ways, that's a very empowering thing to do. So great that you've put this, you're putting the 10,000 girl movement together, and let's make it to 10 million soon. So before I get started, we'll go to the disclaimer page. Just as a reminder that anything we do say here is not advice that's particular for anyone in the audience, so get advice before you do act on anything. So a bit about me, which is the next. I'm an investment advisor and the owner of Ethical Investment Services in Kew, and I've been providing advice for 16 years to a whole range of different groups, organisations and families regarding superannuation, self-managed super funds and private investment money. So that's what I do here. Also, we look after a few not-for-profits and charitable trusts One of which, and we can say this, they've given us permission, is the Australian Conservation Foundation. So we're looking after their money and making sure now that the works that they are doing and the campaigns that they're involved in, and making sure that their money supports that and it's not at odds like Nicolette was mentioning before. Okay, just next slide. Just a little bit about who we are. We've been operating since 1988, and that was a time when ethical investment was a bit of an unusual idea in the finance industry. Nowadays it's a bit more understood and accepted, but even as much as 16, 17 years ago, the mainstream finance industry just wasn't really ready for ethical investment services, but we've been here advising clients Australia-wide for over almost 30 years now, and we have what's called our own license, so we're not beholden to any other groups. And as Nicolette said, the returns that you can get from ethical investment services, or from ethical investments, is they are very competitive and generally outperform mainstream returns. Okay, what we're going to look at today is a bit of the what, how and why of ethical investments, and we'll go into, So what it is basically it's aligning your values with your investment money. It's also called SRI, or socially responsible investing, or ESG investing. It's about investing with a conscience and with some sort of forethought. And it's also recognizing that money can make a difference. And it's a reflection of investors who want to do more with their money than just make money. So the people interested are looking to make money and make a difference. So the word sustainable in the SRI bit reflects the fact that investors are looking to invest capital in a more positive, healthy and transformative way, and hopefully create a more sustainable future. The R is for responsible, and it's about paying attention to how your money is actually working in the world and the kind of impact it's having. Now, the word impact is a new addition to the terminology in the ethical investment space. It's always been there, but it's relatively new, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But socially conscious investors have always been interested in what kind of positive impact they can have, and also what kind of money, what kind of company where they can invest that's a company of the future. So they're interested in making a future that's better for everybody, and along the way making a bit of money as well. So SRI and ethical investing is a process that integrates quantitative and qualitative analysis. So quantitative, I haven't got a stutter, analysis always helps identify profit potential, which is obviously important, and qualitative analysis helps identify policies, practices, behaviours and impacts that companies might have or do have on our society. So it's a combination of the quant and the qual analysis that really sets ethical and SRI investing apart from everybody else. So we'll go to the next slide. So some of the sort of qualitative issues that we look for in our research are listed on this slide here, and these are sometimes called positive screens. And this incorporates what we call the ESG analysis. So we're looking for equal opportunity, recycling, waste management, clean technologies, that kind of thing. And they're things that we look for, and they're positive screens in terms of the investments we look for. So next slide. Some of the negative issues we've identified as important for many investors are listed here, and they're the sorts of things that we try and avoid in terms of where we invest the money. Sometimes, next slide please. All right, so here we've got a list of some of the qualitative screens that can be applied, or the approach that's used when we select investments. Now we've looked at positive and negative screening before. The best of sector I've highlighted there because that's an area that does not employ negative screens so much. Rather, it looks to identify companies with superior ESG performance across all sectors. But that means you could have the best tobacco company or the best mining company, for example, with the best ESG factors. Now, ESG comes from about 2006. The UN Principles for Responsible Investing coined this terminology ESG, which incorporates the things I've been talking about, E being environment, S being social, and G being governance. And these are three primary issue areas where that qualitative analysis is applied to companies. And it's been discovered that through practical experience, our experience, and as well as academic research, that those companies that manage their environmental impact are very well managed companies. And companies that are well governed tend to be more profitable than their competitors in their own industry groups. So those companies that treat their people well, where people really want to work, tend to be outperformers. So ESG analysis is a way to identify better managed companies with lower risks and real profit potential. And it's these things that underpin the philosophy of ethical and SRI investing. Okay, next slide. So I just thought I'd put this up. This is a slide that shows different areas that are subject to climate change risk or vulnerable to climate change issues. So if we can identify climate change issues, we can avoid certain risks that might otherwise not be avoided in mainstream investment analysis. So if you can, if we screen for climate change issues, it means we can avoid investing in these areas that may suffer financially, let alone in other ways, due to climate risks. Australia obviously is okay in that sense, but there, as you can see, the darker red areas are the areas that are more vulnerable to impacts from climate change. All right, next slide. So why invest ethically? It's a way that you can really align your personal values with your investment choices. And there's just some examples there, some pictures to give you an idea of the things that we try to identify. We might want to support worker safety in developing countries and avoid disasters like that Rana Plaza disaster with the factory collapse, which was terrible. And also try and support investments that have environmentally positive impacts so that we're not ruining the habitat for the poor polar bears, or that we're hoping to protect in some way old growth forests. Okay, next one. So the next step is, once you've decided on what you're doing, determining your financial goals, is how to find an advisor that suits you. So it's very important when you are looking for someone to help you with your finances that you have a good relationship with them, so that you have to find someone that feels right for you. So it may be asking a few questions of that advisor, but making sure that they understand what you're wanting to achieve with your finances and that you can relate to that advisor. And often, if you don't already have an advisor, you can interview yourself, you can interview the advisors, and often the first appointment is free, so you can interview a couple and make sure you've got the right person that suits you. Okay. The next step, once you have found an advisor, is to find out what they know about ethical funds. So ask the advisor what they know, and if they say, oh, you can't make any money, as Nicolette was saying, they're not the right advisor if you want ethical funds. But once you start looking at ethical options, look at the fund or look at where your money is about to be invested and ask these questions. Does the fund have an ethical approach as part of the investment process? And if yes, what is the ethical approach of that fund, and that may go back to some of those things that I was talking about before. They might have positive screens or negative screens or a combination of both. And what they'll usually have is an ethical charter. So you can look at their ethical charter and make sure that that charter suits your particular ethical values and your concerns. And then what you can do is drill down a bit more into the underlying investments of the fund. You won't always find out all of them, but you may find the top 10 investments, and have a look at the companies that are in the fund and make sure that those companies align with the charter of the fund and your particular values. Because there are a range of ethical funds out there, and they have different ethical criteria, and there are some that that have certain investments in there that some ethical investors may or may not be that interested, or they may be a bit inconsistent with the ethical values of yourself or the charter of that fund. Okay. So generally, ethical investing gives you exposure to companies that are well managed, because we've identified these ESG factors, and we're identifying companies with strong ratings in that ESG area, which tends to highlight the best companies in their certain fields. And things like healthcare, technology and services, they're often types of companies that you will find in ethical funds. Perhaps, for example, a company like CSL, for example, which is does blood work basically, and finds solutions to health issues. Blackmores, which you probably all know, is medical supplements or vitamin supplements, and not everybody likes that one from an ethical consideration as well. And then renewable energy type of opportunities or energy efficiency companies, waste management and recycling opportunities, infrastructure like transport, and social investment as well. So those are the type of companies that are probably more on the positive side, and they're well managed, or we identify companies that are well managed and often delivering solid returns. Okay, next. So I just thought I'd put this one up here just to show that, I mean, over the past few years, climate change and fossil fuel divestment has become a very important issue for a lot of investors, and even to the extent that the US president, soon to be finished his tenure, but Barack Obama in 2003 was calling for an end to the public financing of new coal plants overseas unless they had some sort of carbon capture technology associated, and if there were no other viable way for the poorest countries to generate electricity. So it's been a big step where the President of the US has now started to say that we do not want to invest in new coal plants due to the climate issues identified. Okay, next slide. So I've put something up here which Nicolette had a general slide about the returns and how they compare. We just thought we'd put this one up as a benchmark. We've benchmarked it against the All Ordinaries, the Australian share market, and a typical growth portfolio that we look at. And you can see over the 3 years and the 5-year period, there is considerable outperformance. Over the last year, you can see the performance is much the same, and basically that's due to the fact that the mining industry has had a huge recovery in the past 12 months. So generally, what tends to be different about ethical funds versus a mainstream fund is that ethical funds may have slightly more exposure to healthcare, technology and financials, and less exposure to the mining and materials sector. And what has been identified, as I said before, through academic research and practical experience, is that ethically screened funds generally do outperform over many time periods. So you can feel good and make money. As we said before,
important message, isn't it? Because I think that you know, there's a lot of mainstream beliefs that that's not the case. So that's such an important message to really understand the facts behind and get excited about.
Yes, and the thing about it is it's not necessarily, you're not taking any more risk or anything like that with money. In fact, sometimes, like I said, you may be avoiding certain risks by the fact that you are investing ethically, because the ESG or the ethical factors that we look for often tend to be a proxy for a well-managed company, a company that treats their staff well, and a company that has a good environmental track record. Those things tend to feed down or flow down to the profit or the bottom line, and you're not only finding companies that are doing positive things, but also you're going to make money with those companies. So getting back to your super fund, I'm not sure where all of you are on your investment journey at this point. Some of you may be beginning, some of you may be well along the way, but generally most Australians have a superannuation account, and if you have super, you are an investor. And if you are an investor, you can make a statement as to where you would like your money invested. All right, next option. Oh, next slide. So if you have super money, or if you have any other money, but most people, as I said, have super, you can identify whether or not your super fund has a sustainable or an ethical investment option and ask that your money be switched to the ethical option. Or if that's not satisfactory and they can't provide you with a sustainable option, you can switch to a pure ethical super investment. And it's not that hard to do. It's a matter of identifying the fund that works for you, knowing how you would like your money invested, and then making that switch. Okay, so next slide. How an ethical investment advisor can help you, because it may all seem a little bit too hard, or where do you start, is the advisor can help you clarify your financial goals and your values and incorporate those two things together. Advisors can help you with your own personal strategy and provide general strategic advice for not just your super, but your general financial situation overall. An ethical advisor will be able to identify and recommend investments that do align with your personal values, and then once you've identified what your personal values are, construct a portfolio and provide you with ongoing advice and management, and whether that be a super or a non-super option. It might be managed funds, or it might be self-managed super funds, or whatever it is that you need. An advisor can help you with that. So, not talking too much about this, but basically the next slide. As I said, an advisor can help you with all of those issues, and that might be a direct share portfolio or a platform. Terminology in finance industry is a platform or a wrap solution, which basically is an administration service that allows you to invest in a whole range of different investment options and also align those options with your financial goals. And finally, for those of you who are interested in doing some of the legwork and the research yourself, this slide here provides you with a list of different organisations or resources that you can look into and find out a bit more about different investments, different ways to be ethical with your money, and how to identify the types of companies that may be in your super fund. The bottom one there, Super Switch, allows you to put in your superannuation the provider of your superannuation, and then gives you some information about how much fossil fuel exposure your superannuation fund has. So those resources will be available to you at the end of this slide. And it's been great sharing a bit of information with you today and on ethical investing, and I'm happy to take a few questions in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle and Nicolette. It's just such strong, clear messages coming through now, even in the last few years, with so much more data and reporting and mainstream exposure and buy-in to responsible or ethical investing. So, yeah, I agree with both of you that it is incredibly exciting, and the fact that you can actually, get those financial returns, as well as, with that extra layers of due diligence and research, potentially reduce your risk, and, it's all just so exciting for the everyday investor. So please send through your questions. In the control panel, there's a question box, so you can type in there any questions you have. I know a question that we get a lot about mainstream investing, and I think this would apply as well, is, how much can you start with? So there were a lot of people logged in that identified in that initial poll that we did that aren't actively sort of ethically investing now, and may or may not be investing, apart from, as you mentioned, in the super, but might have, the capacity to have a few $100s a month or a quarter, or a few $1,000s a year to invest. Are there ways like different managed funds and stuff that we can start off with not huge amounts of money? And do you have any ideas about that?
Okay, yeah, generally it's really, if you've got about a $5,000 starting point, that's usually about the minimum. Could be a little bit less if that was difficult, but if you could start off with, say, 5,000, and even if you started $100 a month or something like that, it's just $20 a week, roughly, then that's a very good way to get started and get some experience in terms of how investing works and the sort of options that are available to you. And yeah, so it's not too high if you're starting out.
Yeah, great. So I'm very surprised. There's plenty of people online, but there's not many questions coming through. So you've either been very, very thorough, you two, and kudos to you, and thank you again. Is there any sort of final tip or word of wisdom or final thought from either of you to finish up?
Well,
I have a question. I wonder, Michelle, would you be able to give us the one or two questions that we should arm ourselves with when we go and actually vet or meet a financial advisor? What are the one or two questions we should ask them just to check in to see if there's a match and that there's someone that you should work with?
Well, if you're looking for an ethical advisor, ask them, which ethical funds do you have on your approved product list that I can invest in?
So therefore you're seeing that they do have, that they are present in their sort of investing portfolio. Is that right?
Yes. So all advisors have what's called an approved product list, that's the list that they're allowed to recommend to you. And if they do not have any ethical funds on that list, well then, and if that's what you're looking for, then it's probably not going to be the right fit because they don't have any options available for you, and also ask them what they think of ethical funds, and that will give you an idea of whether they are on board with that, or whether they just think it's something that it's a small part of your portfolio that's probably, you might be wanting to put some money into. But if they don't have very many options available to you, or don't have any understanding of the ethical funds that are available, then it might be a good thing to find a different advisor. And that's where you can use the RIA website to look for advisors that may be close to you or in the same state perhaps, and you can contact them initially over the phone even, and ask them what their options are.
Great, thank you.
Great. Now, someone's asked, I'm wondering about opinions on managed funds.
Yes, I think managed funds are an excellent way to invest, because they allow you to get a broad range of investments with one investment, if that makes sense. So let's say you've got $10,000, that's not really enough to get a broad spread in terms of a direct share portfolio, whereas if you go into a managed fund with $10,000, that allows you to diversify across a range of different companies, different sectors, and you're usually using the expertise of the fund manager to make those investment decisions for you.
And obviously, with an ethical filter, we can go back to those tools and tips that you both have spoken about. So on the RIAA website, there's that tool to find the sort of leading responsible investment managed funds that focus on the issues that you most care about. And then as Nicolette and Michelle both said, finding an ethical advisor will definitely be a step in the right direction in finding some of the leading responsible investing managed funds.
And what sometimes people get concerned about with managed funds is that there's a cost to them, and yes, no one works for free, and the cost often is, say, possibly a 1% cost of operating a managed fund. But if you're going to achieve a return of 10% or more, then I'm very happy to pay that cost to a fund manager to do the work, to do the thinking, and present me with a portfolio that's going to be well diversified and spread across a range of investments for me.
Yeah, great. So as long as the returns, and we're not talking about the 1, 3, 5 year returns, we're talking about sort of longer term returns, as longer term returns as we can research. As long as the returns outweigh those fees, as you say, it's worthwhile. And there's also a lot of great index funds that tend to be lower cost that have an ethical framework now, Michelle. Is that right?
There are some, but again, you need to make sure that those fund what their ethical screening is in line with your ethical concerns.
Yes, we have certified a few of the lower cost funds like that, and I concur with Michelle. They tend to have 1 or 2 exclusions, such as tobacco, but in the Australian marketplace, it's not a highly developed area yet, unlike some of the places like the United States, where you have a much broader choice on finding those ETFs and so forth that are much more thorough with their ethical screens. So that's just an emerging area in our marketplace still.
Great. So another question. This is a good question. When looking for an advisor, can being in a different state, so for example, New South Wales or Queensland, have any impact on your decisions or investments, for example, legislation, regulations, etc.?
No, it's all pretty standard across Australia. So it's just the geography is just a matter of often if you find the right person, it doesn't really matter if they're interstate because a lot of the work can be done by email or phone and that sort of thing.
It's only if you want to have face-to-face catch-ups. If you're not a frequent visitor, there might be more Skype calls, right?
Exactly, yes. Skype also is a very good medium.
Great. So if there's not any other questions, I would just like to thank you both again. You've provided so much information and we really appreciate that. This recording will be available along with a blog post with a lot of those links that Nicolette and Michelle have shared with us. So we really encourage you to share this information with your different circles and have conversations among your friends and family and family units, especially if you're sharing your financial decision making with someone else. And yeah, it's a really exciting space. And the more I know that when I was in one of our gigs, our girl investment groups, for a couple of years, we used to like bring articles each time we caught up, and we had a bit of an ethical interest among us. And so it was a great way, if we all sort of brought an article and a bit of information about a company or a fund or something together, we can fast track our learning. So that's why I'm really passionate about everyone having conversations and working together. Even if you just find one friend or work colleague or family member who has some interesting alignment with your values and ideas about investing, to just strike up a conversation, and it's amazing what you can learn from each other. So there are quite a few thank yous coming through the chat box, and thank you also to our generous partners who allow us to run these programs. And if you want any more information, there's heaps of different tools and articles and webinar recordings and programs. This is actually our last webinar for the year, but we've got some more programs kicking off in the new year. So thank you all very much. Thank you for the lovely thank you messages. And Michelle and Nicolette, kudos to you for being involved. We really appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thank you.